So tell me again what you're doing at the city council meeting besides wasting your breath. Because so far, all I've gotten out of this is accommodations existed and I took advantage of them in college. And I don't like when people make mean comments to me. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sam. If you are a returning viewer, welcome back to the channel. I'm so glad to have you here with me again this week. I enjoy seeing your smiling faces, reading your comments. It means a lot to me, so I'm glad you keep coming back week after week. If you're new here and this is the first time you are seeing my face, welcome. I make weekly videos dissecting internet nonsense, so if you're into that type of thing or you like today's video, I hope that you'll consider liking and subscribing. It really helps out the channel and it makes sure that you never miss another upload from me. Did you guys notice anything different besides my face breaking out from the amount of sunscreen I had to put on? That's right, I got some sun on my pale skin, and I got a little bit of a tan because I was in Florida, which was a lot of fun. I got to live out my 90s girl Lisa Frank dreams doing a dolphin tour. We mostly just spent all of our time on the beach and it was really super lovely. But I am super glad to be back today, even though it's one of those days and one of those videos where I have to eat my words. I have called out fat acceptance at least 3 times that I can remember for not having a political arm to their movement, even though they were claiming that they did. Can anyone pinpoint for me where we see fat activists actually going for policy and political changes? I'll keep waiting. And today I'm here to say they put me in my place. They finally did it. They put their money where their mouth is. They got some political movement. Or did they? If you are unaware, about a month or 2 ago, Victoria Abraham, better known to us as Fat Fab Feminist on TikTok, went before the New York City Council to testify to her experiences living in New York as a fat person. And she did this to help promote legislation to ban the discrimination of people for housing, employment, and public accommodation based on their height and weight. Here she is in front of the council.
Hi, sorry. My name is Victoria. Thank you for letting me have the opportunity to speak. I just graduated from college in New York this past year, and while I loved my New York experience, I couldn't help but compare it to the experience of my peers. People walking past me with their quick New York stride, hearing the snide comments about how I walk too slow and I take up too much space on the sidewalk. The quick sideways glances as I enter the bus, bags placed on the seat next to them, their biggest fear being touched by fat flesh. Forcing my body through the turnstiles at the train station, turning sideways just to barely squeeze through those metal bars. Having to contact the Center for Disabilities at my school requesting a special accommodation for a desk capable of containing my body. My choices being sit at the special desk at the back of the class, serving as a reminder to the room that I don't fit, or suffer in silence, wood digging into my side, hoping that I remember the lecture, because at that angle there's no way I would get a pen to paper. Something as simple as being able to sit in my seat and take notes like my peers, I did not have the privilege of doing. I had to get accommodations because my school didn't once consider my needs, and I was put at a disadvantage. I wasn't the only student that couldn't fit in those seats. I was just one of the few that knew I deserved better and asked for it. I am consistently doing little things every single day to survive in a city that does not take fat people into consideration. I'm reminded every day that this world, this city that I love so dearly, is built without my body in mind. And that's what's so insidious about anti-fatness. It's everywhere. Sometimes it's not even malicious, it's just in the little things that you would never even notice if you aren't fat. But for people like me, I live my life taking extra steps, making the necessary accommodations just to survive. Every time I squeeze my body into a chair or turnstile that is clearly made for a different body, a smaller body, I'm reminded that I am not considered. I feel like an intrusion, an inconvenience, like I don't belong here. Passing this bill tells fat people that we aren't alone, we're not unwanted, and having the government behind us makes sure that we'll no longer feel as though we're a mere inconvenient afterthought. Thank you.
So the first thing that really stuck out to me in regards to her comments directly to the city council are that she took the very limited minutes that they give you to address a city council, especially such a large one in New York. They limit that time, and she still used that short amount of time to mention the snide comments she gets on the sidewalk for walking too slowly or taking up too much space, and also the side eyes she gets when she has to turn sideways to go through a turnstile to get to the subway or the train. And while I understand that those things are hurtful to people, and people, it sounds like in New York, are generally assholes to people on the sidewalk, that does not surprise me. Why would you waste time when you're trying to pass legislation for discrimination, mention these individual responses that legislation can't change? I just found that so intriguing because the council can't do anything about people being mean to you. That they can't fix that. Legislation can't fix that because people are going to people. I wish that she had spent a little bit more time thinking about how this bill will actually affect the things that it's supposed to affect, and I wish that she would have spoken to that rather than about these comments that nobody can do anything about. The second thing that I found interesting about her comments to the city council in this clip was her discussion of the accommodations that she needed while she was at college, namely asking for a desk accommodation because she could not fit into a regular sized desk. And I understand that asking for that accommodation and needing a desk that looked different than the other desks made her feel othered, right? That's what she's implying with these comments. It's either I squeeze into this desk that I don't fit into where I can't take notes, but at least I look like I fit in, or I ask for this accommodation and I'm immediately an outlier. It's clear to everyone that I don't fit in a desk. And first of all, no matter which one of those she chose, it's clear that you don't fit in the desk. Everyone can see that you don't fit in the desk, right? And the truth is, most people don't care. They're very focused on themselves. That's an internal thing. That's an anxiety thing that she was dealing with in those moments. And I understand. I also dealt with that, okay? Those desks suck. But that is not something that this legislation is going to help with. Once again, those accommodations already exist. She told us that she had access to them, right? They already exist. And do you know why they exist? Because the disability community has been fighting for years to get those accommodations put in place. And I think that this stuck out for me because it's accommodation that already exists for people, right? That the disability community has already fought for and gotten put in place. And yet and still, we have a fat person coming in and basically saying, that's not good enough for me. It still makes me feel othered. There are people who are still fighting hard to have basic fundamental human rights, and fat people are not one of those groups. I'm having a hard time wrapping my thoughts into a nice little package with a bow here. So maybe one of you could help me in the comment section below. I can't quite put my finger on why this bothers me so much, but it really, really does. These accommodations exist. So tell me again what you're doing at the city council meeting besides wasting your breath. Because so far, all I've gotten out of this is accommodations existed and I took advantage of them in college. And I don't like when people make mean comments to me. I understand she's testifying to her experience, but legislation can't fix those. It's as easy as that. Now, a week or so ago, the New York City Council did actually pass legislation making it illegal to discriminate based on weight and height. And it's true, she testified in front of the council, so she did have a small part in this legislation being passed. So I guess before we look into the document itself, let's see what her response was to the legislation being passed. Take a look.
Just got news that the bill did pass. In New York City, we now have protection for fat people. We have protection for the workplace, housing, and public accommodations for people of all weights and heights. The bill passed 44 yes to 5 no. We did it. I'm so happy. There have been so many people working on getting this bill passed. I have been such a small part of it, but I'm so grateful to have even played such a minute piece of it. I'm so happy. This bill has made history. I can count on my hands how many places in the country there are protections for fat people. And now New York City is one of them. I am so beyond happy and proud of all the work that everyone has done for this. NAFA, Flair, the council members, there's so many people who have been involved. Fat activists and people just telling their story. I know I haven't shut up about this, but I'm literally so happy. This is such a big deal.
She was so excited that she even got herself interviewed by CNN. Take a look here.
Studies have found that weight discrimination is widespread and is comparable to the levels of racial discrimination in the U.S.
This city that I love so dearly is built without my body in mind.
Victoria Abraham testified in support of the New York City bill last month. She is a self-proclaimed fat activist and content creator.
I know I'm fat. That's not a bad thing, though. And I think the more that we use it as a neutral, as a descriptor, the less power it has.
Do you think that some of the discrimination for fat people happens through unconscious bias?
I think a lot of the biases against fat people are unconscious because they're never called out, because our society functions with fat phobia imbued in it.
Weight discrimination has real financial impacts. The average American woman is reportedly a size 16. But one study showed that women considered obese earned $5.25 less per hour than women considered normal weight.
Walking into a job interview as a fat person, I'm already at a disadvantage. My weight is a con, right? And regardless of if it's intentional or not.
But there is one thing that will be different if you do decide to pursue the job market. This new law.
Exactly.
Does that make you feel a little bit better?
For sure. This bill is so important because we're having this conversation, because we're talking about what it means to be a fat person existing in the world, that we are being reminded that our bodies should never be a barrier to anything.
So this clip that CNN put together and she shared on her platform was very interesting to me for a few reasons. This isn't the first time this week that I've heard about the economic impacts of obesity, or that obese women make less money than regular-sized women, whatever that means. It is, however, I'm curious if any of you heard this, the first time I've heard them say there was one study that found that obese women make less than regular-sized women. One study. Isn't it so interesting that it's always one study or one book? It's a trend that I can't help. It's one book tying fat phobia and racism. It's one book talking about why the obesity paradox exists. It's one study saying that they make less money. What an interesting trend, right? Like, did that stick out to anyone else, or is it just me? Because you know, sometimes I can't help it. It's the petty, it's the general snark that I tend to have. But like, good Lord, as soon as she said that, I was like, that was just too clear for me to not mention it in this video, because it always cracks me up when they're like, how do you not know this? There's one book. Great. That doesn't mean anything. Anyway, what really stuck out to me was the last sentence that Fat Fab Feminist said, which was that this is a reminder that our fat bodies should never be a barrier to anything. Did anyone else catch that? To anything. This sentiment is so interesting to me, and also immediately made me curious if anyone else was like alarmed, like ding, 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 alarm bells going off. Because we live in a time and a place where fat activists are online complaining about not being able to ride a roller coaster, right? Even though it would go against safety guidelines, or complaining about not being able to fit down the aisle of an airplane in the first class section. Tell me you've got first world problems. But not only are they complaining, they're actively calling it discrimination. Which is why, to me, it's so interesting to see anti-discrimination legislation, that's a phrase, coming out while they're actively doing these things online. Hey everyone, Sam here. Please excuse the interruption. It is very late on a Sunday night, and this video is about to go up for you tomorrow on Monday morning. That's correct, I procrastinated. And as would happen to any good procrastinator, I was getting ready for bed tonight, opened my TikTok app, and discovered a TikTok by TikTok user BowberryVIP, where she is telling us that that airline clip that I actually just showed in this video is her content that has been stolen from her, with a fat activist caption placed over top of it that she did not create and does not believe in. So it didn't feel appropriate to take that out and pretend that it didn't happen. I did want to just take a moment to apologize for not having done better research, and it didn't feel appropriate to put this apology or explanation in a separate video, right? Because then you will have already seen this and formed opinions and maybe never see that other video. So I wanted to make sure it was all here for you. Thank you so much. Please ignore me when I talk about this airline. And to Bowberry, I am very sorry for not doing my research. It made me want to see the actual legislation, like the actual language in this bill that passed. Does it have any teeth? Is it actually going to offer any legitimate relief to fat people? That's what I wanted to know when I started looking this up. And I found it on the New York City Council's webpage, containing all of their policies and meeting minutes. Everything that's required to be public is there. It's not very pretty. It's on par with government websites. It's a lot of black and white text that's not formatted very well. So I'm going to put some language on the screen while I'm going over this, and it won't necessarily be screenshots because, again, the screenshots are going to be so wide because of the way it's formatted that by the time they're shrunk down to this size, you won't be able to read them anyway. But trust me, they're there. You can easily search the New York City Council and this same language will pop up. But before I get to the bill itself, I'll tell you what really stuck out to me straight away. This is not new legislation. This is an existing piece of legislation, and this committee just went in and added the words height and weight to the list that already includes race, color, creed, age, national origin, immigration status or citizenship status, gender, sexual orientation, disability, marital status, partnership status, caregiver status, sexual or reproductive health decisions, and uniformed service. It's a long list, so they've only gone and added height and weight to that. So what I'll do to show that to you is I will highlight in the document, like I will take a screenshot of part of the web page, and I'll highlight all the places where they've just written in height and weight and then underlined it to signify that it's new. That's most of the work that they did. The only part they really added to in length was a subdivision, specifically subdivision 1, section 8-107. It reads like this. The provisions of this subdivision relating to height and weight shall not apply to an action by a covered entity based on a person's height or weight when such an action is required by federal, state, or local law regulation, permitted by regulation adopted by the commission identifying particular jobs or category of jobs which a person's height or weight could prevent them from performing essential requisites of the job, or the commission has not found alternative action that covered entities could reasonably take to allow persons who do not meet the height or weight criteria is reasonably necessary for the execution of normal job operations. They also will not prevent entities from offering incentives that support weight management as part of voluntary wellness programs. So, what did this bill actually accomplish? I mean, yes, height and weight are now included in case an employer is ever like, you're fired because you're morbidly obese, but I have never personally heard of that happening to someone. I'm curious if any of you have heard of that happening to someone. If you have, please share it with me in the comment section down below. I would be so curious to learn about that and to read more, because I've never ever heard of someone being hired explicitly because of their height or their weight. So with that said, then things will just carry on like normal for employers. Literally, this changes nothing. They can still offer incentives. They can still have height and weight requirements, especially for things that it would apply to potentially, like, I would say life-saving positions, so like a firefighter or a paramedic or a police officer. I mean, gosh, even my job description was like, you might have to lift up to 50 pounds. Like, they've kind of got those things. You need the ability to stand for long periods of time. Like, those are things that they can still put into job descriptions because it is a requisite of the job. And this legislation does nothing because it's a requisite of the job to be able to do that. So you still can't do the job and they still don't have to hire you. I don't know if it makes her feel better to actually have this on paper. But I mean, things have been functioning this way for a very long time. So it doesn't really seem like a win to me, I guess, is what I would say about that. It seems like it just took a lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of resources for something that could already be taken care of under the disability category that's already listed in that long list of things. The language surrounding the protections for housing is pretty much the same as the employers. It's a lot of legalese. It's very boring. It's a lot of just adding height and weight and underlining it. So I'm not going to bore you with that. But what I am going to do is switch gears and talk about the protections for public accommodations, because to me, this is the most interesting bit, again, as we're seeing fat activists online talking about roller coasters and aisles and how chairs are fat phobic. So let's look at this new language. According to this new language, it is unlawful to refuse, withhold, or deny any person the full and equal enjoyment of any public accommodation unless it is required by federal, state, or local regulation, is permitted by the commission, or there is no alternative action that could be reasonably taken by the entity that would allow patrons to use or enjoy the accommodations. Like I mentioned earlier, when Fat Fab Feminist was sitting with CNN, she said, fat bodies should never be a barrier to anything. And that stuck out to me as it related to this bill and public accommodation protections. This online culture of fat activism has had issues with roller coasters, right? Where they are angry that they can't fit into a roller coaster. There was a story, it was maybe a year ago, where a boy was fit into a roller coaster even though he shouldn't have because of the weight requirements. He was actually, the harness did not hold him the way it was supposed to because he did not fit those safety requirements, and he actually died falling from the roller coaster. And they were outraged by that, saying that these companies need to start making roller coasters that fit fat people and fit them safely to fit the safety requirements. And so, under this new law, is that a reasonable accommodation? It doesn't seem so, because it has to be reasonable for that company to make the change. But I'm curious how the law will determine what is a reasonable change. Like, how will the commission decide? And I'm especially curious for small businesses. Small businesses tend to take the brunt of most of these things. So if a small business, say a small restaurant like a cafe, their chairs have arms, they're snug, they maybe don't hold, they're plastic or something, and they don't hold 300 pounds, and one breaks under a fat woman. Is that small business now going to be sued because they didn't make a reasonable accommodation? What is the cost of them having to replace all of their furniture? And would that put them out of business? This is the worry that I have about laws like this, but I do also know that these laws exist in other cities, and so far it doesn't appear that there are any superfluous things going on, not a whole bunch of crazy lawsuits. So I'm like, fingers crossed. And again, it doesn't actually seem like this legislation has made a lot of actual meaningful change. So we'll have to just wait and see. All right. I don't want to beat a dead horse. We've already talked about it, but I will leave you with this. I do not understand why fat activists are wasting their time and energy fighting for accommodations that already exist. They're fighting for legislation that already protects them in an effort to change individual opinions about them walking too slowly on the sidewalk or taking up too much space. They are utilizing resources, such as legislators and their limited time, to fight for a first world problem. When there are actually groups of people losing their rights or having their rights stripped away from them every single day, especially in the United States. Rather than focusing on the real harm in the world, they are actively choosing to focus on their hurt feelings and their individual anxieties about their life. And that is something I just cannot and will not learn to understand. Like, that is just crazy to me. Congratulations, I guess, to Fat Fab Feminist for getting this legislation passed. But in my heart of heart, it's legislation that doesn't do anything for anyone. This doesn't do anything of substance, and it's wasted a lot of resources and a lot of time. You guys will have to let me know what you think in the comment section below about this. Have you seen this law? What do you think? I'd be curious to know, and I always look forward to your comments. They actually brighten my day, especially when I end a video like this and I'm in a bad mood. So if you've made it this far, leave me your favorite emoji. That's always a fun one. Do you have a favorite? You'll have to comment it down below. Thank you all so much for being here with me today. I will see you in the next one. Bye.